My second comment has to do with recommendation number 5, the need for new funding apparatuses. And I think we don't only have to focus on getting more dollars, I think we need to consider where the funding goes. So first, I want to see new money go towards funding actual stewardship results rather than specific stewardship practices, particularly on private land. When you fund practices rather than results, you don't necessarily get the right action in the right place. For instance, I consider the environmental farm plan in Saskatchewan, and while I recognize that's been an important contribution to raising landowner awareness about the impact of their activities on the environment, I hate to think about how many trees have been planted on my prairie in the name of stewardship. When you fund practices rather than results, landowners also don't have the flexibility to choose stewardship actions that make the most sense for their land. And I think it's going to be very easy to switch to a results-based model. We have the tools already, and I was pleased to see Cows and Fish here with their riparian assessment tool. And I think landowners, there's a riparian assessment tool. I know that there's a rangeland assessment tool, and landowners can take an audit of their land, see where they are, and if they have an improvement after whatever activity they choose to do, they can get some funding and support for that. And I like that because what is a healthy rangeland or what is healthy riparian? These models, these tools have been developed by consensus, by multiple actors, coming to the same idea that this is what health means for that particular type of area. It also requires the landowner to take accountability, to actually ask if their actions are, in fact, aimed towards stewardship. And it doesn't exclude people who are upfront, the ones that have already done a number of actions. They can also participate because you can always move up the matrix. You can always get better, and so they can participate as well. So that's one of the concerns that I have, or one of the recommendations I would have with respect to funding practices. Another reason why I would want to focus my recommendations on changing from practices to actual results is that the grassroots organizations who do the bulk of the stewardship work have no mechanism to access essential sustained core funding. When committed volunteers and employees are stuck working bingos and washing dishes at yet another foul supper just to keep the lights on, they burn out and they disengage because it's very difficult to see how their efforts are making a difference. I was delighted to learn that BC has initiated a core funding program because it allows these organizations to get out there and do the work they want to do and to take the time to build relationships with other stewards and with people who are in a position to become stewards. If we're going to nurture the stewardship ethic, it has to start with building relationships. Jean Vanier, the founder of the L'Arche Communities, in his book Becoming Human, reminds us that all of us have this need to belong, and our sense of identity is formed by the relationships we have with others. If we want people to identify as stewards or to have a stewardship ethic, they need to feel they belong here. Core funding frees up people to spend time on these relationships, and as one conference participant said to me, it gives people time to drink the coffee that's offered to them by the landowner they want to have a relationship with. The time to build a relationship by finding common ground. Similarly, I applaud the Digital Stories Project and want to emphasize how important I believe giving funding to people to have the opportunity to share their stories with others. When people see themselves in the experiences of others who call themselves stewards, how long can it be until they themselves identify as stewards? My final comment, and I'm not sure where it fits in the recommendations, but I think it's something we need to consider, is how we engage with our, as we develop the stewardship agenda, how we engage with our Indigenous peoples. We need to reform the dynamics of our relationships with Canada's First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I teach in a specialized diploma program for land managers on reserves, First Nations land managers, and one of them was here, I was happy to see. In the spring, a group of my students and I went to a conference, a national conference aimed at First Nations governance and economic development. And I sat back and was struck by how these land managers and their political leaders were swarmed, and that's really the only word I could use, by resource developers, NGOs, government people, academics, all offering their business cards to these folks because they had an idea or a plan or an opportunity or something to work with and partner with these First Nations. In fact, each of these students came back with such a pile of business cards. It reminded me of, my kids' hockey cards or Pokemon cards. They could play, I'll trade you 3 academics for a resource development and a government worker. It was, in fact, quite shocking. And I retell this story not to question the motives of the people in the organizations handing out their business cards, but I was struck by what this says about the relationships we have with our Indigenous peoples of Canada. Each of these people had an idea and a solution or an opportunity that they felt they could offer the First Nation, and each approached the First Nation with a sense of urgency. We have $50,000 to put on the table here, or a research project that we've got to get started by September, and you just need to sign up today, or we can go down the street and go to the next First Nations. And it was incredible to see the stress that this placed on my students and their political leaders, because none of them wanted to be responsible for missing the one opportunity that may answer the economic, ecological, or social problems in their communities. So it didn't surprise me then when I heard that many of these communities jump from one project to the next without taking the time to determine whether the project really meets the goals and aspirations of their community members. And so what I think we need to think about as we move forward with our stewardship agenda is abandoning the idea that we know, that we can, and that we have the solutions. And we need to change the dynamic of this relationship. Those of us in the stewardship community need to stop leading and setting the agenda for First Nations and begin listening and following. Regardless of the motivations of our well-meaning solutions and opportunities, I really think we are undermining First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people's ability to be stewards on their own land. We need to resist the temptation to offer direction and answers. Rather, we should wait for invitations to provide support, to empower First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people to come up with their own solutions to their own self-defined problems. And to our Indigenous delegates who are here, let me encourage you not to be misled by our sense of urgency. You have long demonstrated your ability to be good stewards of the land, and you have the time to determine your own stewardship priorities. And because you have the resources, the land, and the young people, when you decide you want to work with us, either resource developers, NGOs, academics, or government scientists, we will be waiting for what you want to offer us to our stewardship agenda. Thank you.